Hey guys, you ready for your video on what we did in week 7 on our community day? So if you look at the schedule, week 7 is here. So to be prepared for week 7, they highlighted and previewed pages 35 to 37, and that would be what we would discuss when they came to class. So the basics of this portion is an introduction to third declension, gender in the third declension, and the Declension of Lēx. So it does talk about the difference between Lēx and pars here, but I actually just stopped it right there. They have some exercise they're going to do. We did not get all the way over here where they introduce pars because I wanted a soft entry into third declension. So I will post a picture of my lesson plan, but I want to walk through you what we did. So I put these vocabulary words on the board. I did not have them marked up in any way, shape, or form, just the words were up there. And I had all of the kids keep their books closed because I didn't want any, I didn't want them to look up anything. I just wanted them to make observations. So sure enough, right off the bat, somebody noticed that we had the endings were the same in all of the words. And so because we know from first and second declension that the genitive singular ending is what identifies the noun as first or second declension, we came to the conclusion that the IS is the marker for third declension. So I went through and I chose a red marker and I circled all of those because red happens to be the color that I have third declension as. So anyway, so we did that, and then if I asked them if those are all the same, what do you notice about the nominative singular endings? And lo and behold, we figured out that even though a number of them are the same, these guys all end in an X, these guys are different. And so that is where we get our various ending. And so we kind of sang through our memory work for those of us who have done foundations before, the memory work for the third declension endings. Anyway, so it was a reminder that I'm sorry, I lost track. After we went through that, we talked about how the is very similar to the is of second declension. We viewed all of our declension endings, how we have the AE in first, the is is second declension, even though, yes, we have two of them. We have a masculine and a neuter. And then we have this is our third declension. And so we talked a little bit about the pronunciation difference between those. One is is and the other is is. Anyway, so after we did that, we came back to our textbook and we read. So usually when we read in the textbook, I have the students read and I have the students take turns explaining to me what we read. So by now they've already kind of seen it a couple times. They previewed it, they highlighted it, we've talked about it, we've sort of figured out the patterns already. So by the time they read it, they're kind of familiar with it. It makes it easier for them to comprehend. Oh, I did have them mark up their textbook like this to identify the is makes third declension, and that's the genitive singular, and the nominative singular is various. Anyway, so we took turns reading all the way down until we got to here, and when we discovered that we would have to understand these rules in order to understand the genders. So at that point, we got out our blue book, and honestly, they have not highlighted this yet. I have mine highlighted, but I haven't assigned them to do that yet. So they'll do that this coming week. But anyway, we took turns reading the rule and seeing if we could figure out what it meant and maybe coming up with some English nouns that would apply. Like, for example, nouns naming an individual male person. We came over here and some of them kind of knew what some of these words already meant. I think one person knew that homo hominis was man. And so we're like, well, if that is a noun that names a male person, then I would assume it would be masculine, right? Anyway, so we walked through each of these rules. If it's a female person, then it's going to be a feminine noun. I explained to them that these two rules are always going to trump any other rules that we're going to learn. And then we went into our other 3 rules, the error, the socks, and the lancet. And so I think as we were having this conversation, I was labeling the board kind of like this right here. So first and foremost, if it names a person and it's a man person, it's masculine. A female person is feminine. If it's not specifically a person, then we go to these rules. And I told them it didn't matter if the noun is something that a man would do. Like, for example, all of the sentences and things that we're doing in this Latin textbook, there's a lot of, the Romans slaughtering the Gauls and all that kind of stuff. So there is a noun coming up soon in our vocabulary, slaughter. I said, what do you think that word is? Do you think it's going to be masculine or feminine? Of course, they're all like, well, masculine, because that's what the soldiers did. They slaughtered the Gauls, and the soldiers were men. And I was like, well, believe it or not, slaughter is going to be feminine, because it's not about the context of the word. It's about whether or not it refers to an actual person. So if the person is masculine or feminine, great. Once you get that out of the way, then you go to these rules. So we talked through each of these and how to, help us remember what they were. And then we went through all of our vocabulary and we identified what they were and how we had to know what the word meant in order to figure out the gender. Because if we didn't know what the word meant, we didn't know if it was a man person or a woman person. So I labeled, we sort of guessed at the meanings. I wanted to see if they could figure it out. And at this point, I don't have it written on this piece of paper, but we talked through a lot of our English derivatives, like legislature or legal, those kinds of things. And I try to let the kids come up with words that they think might give us a hint as to what the word means. And if there's moms in the room, I might ask them and ask them to join in on this, because they have a wider vocabulary base than the students do. But anyway, we would identify what the word means. And if it meant a person, then that was easy. We could tell man person, woman person, and we would label it masculine. We don't have any woman person nouns here. So we went ahead and then just went through. If that does not refer to a person, so we have to come over here to our nominative singular and look at the last letter. So this one happens to be an X. So we're going to use our socks rule, and it's feminine. We walked through that process for all of our nouns. And so then I was like, well, let's go ahead and look at our rules 57 and 58. Actually, hold on just a second. We did the gender rules, and then we went to page 36 and we read. So we read through this. And we learned that there is more than one declension in the third declension. And so they have introduced 2 at this point. We have the one for Lēx and the one for parse. So rule 57 and 58, we went to our rule book and we just spent a few minutes making observations of these 2 declensions. Now it is third declension, but these 2 different groupings within the third declension. And really, the only difference was the and the here. So I didn't really want to get too much into this right now, because I wanted to just focus on the gender rules and understanding this. So I am saving the parse declension for next week. We're going to do it then. And so honestly, I told them how these rules were out down here were going to help us to understand the difference between these 2, but they didn't need to know that for this week's homework. So we will revisit that next week. But anyway, we went through this, we sang our little song, and then I had them choose a noun to decline together as a class. So they declined it in their workbook, and I declined it on the whiteboard. This is the one we did. I'm actually glad they chose this one, because a lot of kids mess up and they forget that their stem comes from the genitive singular, and they'll drop the O and just do home. And anyway, you've got to come here to get your stem. So we circle the ending and we underline the stem, and then they declined. I told them if they had a question, they could ask the person next to them. But they would do their best, and then they could grade themselves by looking on the board and see if their workbook matches what I did up there. Now, in the workbook, it looks something kind of like this, where we'll do the singular noun here, the plural noun there. For the translations, we do it similar to what is in the blue grammar book, but I don't have them bother with doing the parentheses S for plural. We just decided at the beginning of the year we were just going to write the translations for the singular, knowing that if we were doing plural, we would add the S onto the end. But anyway, after we declined this noun, I think that was pretty much it. We played around the world. And I'm going to do another video that explains how we play around the world. But it's a great game, and it gives me the opportunity to quickly spot who knows what's going on and who doesn't. And I can review pretty much any concept that I want to with that game. So I hope this is helpful. And oh, one more thing. We did talk about in the homework on exercise 30, I told them that they could take this first one and see if they could verbally explain these rules to their mom and explain the genders of each of the nouns. Now, we did highlight them based on gender, but they could try to explain why they are what they were. And then the declining they'll be doing in their workbook. And this one I told them they could skip for now because we haven't really talked about the difference between lakes and pars yet. So we'll get there next week. Anyway, all right, that's it.